StreamYard tells me that I am live. However, I know if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you're just now getting a notification and you're not here yet. So I'm going to start off addressing those people who are watching the replay. This is about how you can begin your journey, and there are a couple links in the post or description box below about good places to start. The basic premise of what I'm talking about, last week I did a live stream on the topic of how I began. And how I began had a great deal to do with being extraordinarily desperate. I'm assuming and hoping for your sake that you are nowhere near as sick and desperate as I was. So you may need a different motivation to get started. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Because I'm live streaming to both Facebook and YouTube, I'm not actually on either Facebook or YouTube. So I can't even tell who's watching. Hello, Jude. Thank you for commenting. That's just what I was going to say. If everyone wanted to say hello, that would be handy so I know I'm not talking to myself. Jude says she is in Virginia. I'm not that far from you. I'm in Pennsylvania, just a bit north. Hello, Georgia. Good to see you. Georgia's becoming a real fan. She's showing up to all of these. Okay, so now I'm going to start the slideshow. Oh, hi, Cedric. Good to see you. An upgrade from Messenger, isn't it? From chatting in Messenger. Okay, so I'm going to start the slideshow now. And at the end, we will have a Q&A where you can ask me anything on this topic or any other you want to ask me. So how some begin, which is what I talked about last week, was seriously intense desperation. And if you haven't seen that, you might want to watch the replay. That's how I began. But others begin with just a little bit of hope that it might work. Even the faintest hope is enough. You don't have to have faith or really believe it yet, in spite of all the hundreds of people who've gone before, even thousands really, that have gone before you. If you just have a little bit of hope, it's sort of like, I've used the example before, it's sort of like going on a first date, okay? You might like this person, you might not. You don't have to decide before you've gone. You just need a little bit of, maybe I'm interested. We'll find out. When you first start, you are going to need a certain amount of what nicer people than me call willpower. But when it's me, I think of it as stubbornness. I know I can be stubborn. I hope I have an open mind when there is more data presented. But if I have my mind made up and there isn't more data presented, I can be very stubborn. And having a good dose of that when you start really is helpful too. It's not hard in the long run, but I think you need a good bit of willpower the first few days. Desperation is really not necessary. Some people start healthy with a relatively small amount of weight to lose, and they're just not desperate like those of us who are, not to be over dramatic, but I was literally dying when I began this. But you can start where you are. You don't have to be desperate. You just need a little bit of hope and the willingness to throw some willpower at it for a few days. Some people start slow. Like they might join the group and be around for 6 months or a year, watching all these success stories come on top of each other and just not getting started themselves. I've never heard anyone say that they regret starting, but I've heard many people say they regret they waited so long. And some people never do start. half the people who sign up for the 3-day challenge, even though they've signed up for it, I should back up a little bit and explain what the 3-day challenge is. The 3-day challenge is Amanda's email system that basically gives you a shopping list and then videos every day for 3 days to explain the way that we eat and give you some demos. And she can look at the statistics on the back end, and half of the people who sign up don't ever watch any of the videos. So we know those people aren't even starting. But also, we're going to talk about what the start is. I mean, obviously, if you sign up for the 3-day challenge, which is linked here, you'll find out. But basically, we're talking about starting a low-carb diet to greatly reduce your insulin resistance, which is what is needed to reverse diabetes and, incidentally, lose a whole bunch of weight, which is nice. And there's a lot of versions of low-carb that you can do. There have been for just decades and decades. I mean, since before, like people think of Atkins as old. Atkins was regurgitating stuff that was even older than that. So there's a lot of ways of doing it. There's the extremes I think of as people who go all the way carnivore and pretty much just eat meat and eggs and cheese versus people who will do a vegetarian or vegan version of keto. I like an in-between version. And I specifically like what we call the ridiculously big salad because I find that every day I'm not up to gourmet cooking. I'm not up to spending a lot of time in the kitchen. And the handy thing about the ridiculously big salad is it takes me 5 or 10 minutes a day to fix, which is extremely important because while you need some willpower to start, over time, it just needs to be easy. And if you're sitting here thinking, but I don't like salads, it's a particular framework, and the 3-day challenge takes you through some salad examples, but also an example of a cooked meal that works. I also like the ridiculously big salad because when you eat that larger pile of vegetables, I think a lot of us who are omnivores in the middle, but eat the ridiculously big salad or similar meals, actually eat more vegetables than many vegetarians. And it's just very filling and satiating. Any diet I've ever been on in the past, it seems like I had to stop eating before I was full. So I needed the willpower every day, all the time. With the ridiculously big salad, it doesn't work that way because you're full. If you're not full, as Amanda says, you didn't eat enough greens. And we really are talking about a ridiculous amount of vegetables. But, for the salads, they have dressing, which gives you flavor because who would eat that much lettuce without it? And for the cooked meals, which more often have like cauliflower or broccoli or asparagus or something, those usually come with the sauce. Again, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to eat a pound of cauliflower without something on it. But they're, again, also fast and easy to make, whether you're cooking or just throwing together a salad. I have found this to be a very sustainable way of eating. If you want to lose weight as well as reducing your insulin resistance, you're going to want this to be a relatively low-calorie meal. And the high amount of vegetables helps with that a great deal because if I have put a pound of cauliflower in my belly, there's just not room for a lot of high-calorie stuff in there. You can make, and people in maintenance do make these meals at a higher calorie level, but I'm not at goal yet, so I kind of prefer trying to keep the calories low. And And then the next thing that's really important, even if you're eating very low carb, eating it all is still going to raise insulin. So this is where intermittent fasting comes in. And there's many variations on this. Um, the most popular in the group is what we would call 23-1. And what 23-1 means is you fast 23 hours and you eat in a 1 hour eating window. And that is pretty much one of the strictest ways of intermittent fasting. But we also have people who eat 2 meals a day, maybe in a 5 hour window or a 6 hour window. And the smaller that window can be that you can live with and that is sustainable for you, the less you're going to raise insulin. And the less you raise insulin, the fastest your insulin resistance is going to reverse. The issue is we're almost like, there's such a thing as drug tolerance. If you take a drug, it stops working, you might need more, et cetera, et cetera. Well, diabetics are kind of in that position, except the drug is insulin and we're the ones making it. So to wean off of our elevated levels of insulin, fasting helps a great deal because it just lowers insulin so much. Sometimes in some who are more extremely ill will also use extended fasting. And basically, extended fasting means not eating for more than a day. And I began that way myself because, as mentioned earlier, I was very desperate. The thing about extended fasting is it does help you reverse, because you're keeping your insulin low longer. It does help reverse insulin resistance faster. And obviously, there's really nothing as low calorie you can eat as nothing. So it does increase weight loss. Whether it's good for the long term or not, I had to do some. I found out that even eating very low carb, if I ate more than 4 days in a row when I started, that my blood glucose got high enough that I had to take insulin, and I was trying to get off of it. So I started just eating 4 days a week, and I did that for about 8 months. I'm not nearly that extreme now. I generally fast like a day or two or three times a month at most. And sometimes not even that much. Because part of what we're doing, like, I don't want to be diabetic again. And it's not like I can fast forever. So, like, I really need to know how to eat, not just now while I'm still losing weight, although diabetes is long gone and goodbye. I don't miss you at all. But not only, I need to do this for the long term. And I mean, that's where so many diets have failed in the past, is that, we lose a certain amount of weight and we're happy. And then people will say things sometimes like, but when you go back to eating normal, well, I'm not going back to eating so-called normal, because if I go back to doing what I did before, I'm just going to end up 300 pounds and diabetic again. No, thank you. So it's, while fasting, extended fasting can help with reversing diabetes and losing weight. And it also buys you some autophagy, which is a process that's very, very healing. Knowing how to eat is probably going to be more important for the long term and for maintenance and for staying there. Once you've achieved better health, not going backwards. In my experience, this is a huge change, not just in eating. Eating, obviously, eating properly is absolutely necessary, but there's a huge change in how we think about food. And that seems to be the case for the vast majority of our most successful bears, that they had large mindset changes in how they thought about food. But now that I've described the start, and those of y'all have not ever heard about this before, thinking, oh my God, she's crazy, She's talking about only eat once a day and no bread, no pasta, no rice, no potatoes. Oh my God, that sounds scary. Well, any change is scary, and I completely get that. Even if you're not happy with where you are, it's comfortable because you're used to it. And I mean, even as sick as I was when I started, I was used to being sick. I'd been disabled for 10 years. It wasn't new. Whereas when you decide to change, you don't really know what's going to happen. And it's a bit scary and intimidating. So when I asked myself, what stops people? Why do people sign up for the 3-day challenge and then just stop? That's the first answer I come up with, is that change is scary. But there's other stuff too. You're afraid of being deprived. Um, I wouldn't have been able to, when I began, believe I would never eat carbs again. In fact, I had planned to start on August 1st of 2019, and I didn't start till August 2nd because I had to stay up really late at night and eat a whole freaking package of noodles because I thought, oh, I'm going to be deprived for a period of time. And this is going to sound really, really crazy, but not having eaten any noodles at all in over 2 years, I do not feel deprived at all. The change in my life, but see, I can't give that to you before you start. I can't, I'm just grateful for my new life, and I don't feel deprived at all about the things I can't eat because I feel my illness and disability was much more of a deprivation. I've gained so much more than I've lost. But again, I can't really give that to you when you're starting. I can maybe suggest that you could, if you decide to try the 3-day challenge, just try it for 3 days. You don't have to decide you're never going to eat carbs again. I didn't decide that until I saw results and then went, oh, wow, look what carbs were costing me. I had no clue. People are also afraid of being hungry. I'm going to eat once a day. That's crazy. I'll be hungry all the time. It turns out that we have a hormone called ghrelin, which peaks every day at the times we eat. And back when I was a child, that peaked 3 times a day because that's how often my mother fed me. But as I grew up and we kept being told to eat many small meals a day and all of that, which ends up being a really good excuse for lots of snacking and generally snacking on stuff that I didn't really need to eat. That hormone, in my case anyway, it would start to peak somewhere between noon and 2 p.m. and it would keep peaking until I went to bed, whether I went to bed on time, like at 9 or 10, or was up till 2 in the morning. I could joke that I already ate one time a day. It just was 12 hours long. But as our hunger hormone raises the way we're used to eating. So that's why I said you need a good bit of willpower right at the start, because at the start, you are fighting your hormones. But as you do this for a few days, it turns out that your hormones greatly change. And for me, I usually eat between 4 and 8 p.m., and I don't start getting hungry until then. And then I'm done because I've retrained it. Now, sometimes it can get a little out of whack. Sometimes I'll start getting hungrier oftener. And honestly, that's a good time for me personally to decide to fast for a day or two, which turns down the hunger hormone. But basically, it's not that there won't be hunger, because there will be, but it really only hangs around for a couple days, and it's just so easy to fix. Also, I'm not sure why we're so afraid of hunger. I mean, during my first fast, when I started, I noticed it. I noticed I felt hungry. I noticed I heard my belly making lots of noises and stuff. It doesn't actually hurt. So I remember thinking that during my first fast, because to me, hunger was always a problem you had to solve. And the sudden realization that, like, no, you don't. I mean, if you think of other drives in your life, okay, I'm going to get a little bit personal here. Think about sex, okay? Right? You don't think you have to go out and have sex every time you're a little bit horny, do you? No, I don't anyway. I wish. It's really kind of similar. I mean, hunger is the signal from your body to eat, but like I said, it tends to be a signal to do what you've already done. And if what you've done has not gotten you the results you want, you need to change what your hunger hormone is doing, um, not just keep responding to it every time. Another big fear, particularly for women who've been overweight for a while, is how the people around you might react to your change. I will tell you that people will think you're nuts. Because when Amanda first told me how she'd lost 100 pounds in 8 months and how, I thought she was nuts. Um, the irony is, while I was sitting there working my way back up to 300 pounds and um, extremely diabetic with completely out of control blood glucose in spite of multiple daily injections of insulin, and basically disabled to the degree that I could not walk. And sometimes getting from my desk to the John was literally difficult. I thought her eating sounded weird, but never thought what I was doing was completely crazy. Although it had brought me to such a horrible place. So there's that. There's just that, people will tell you you need to eat more. And honestly, when I started, I just didn't tell anybody. I was still living with my husband then. He didn't even notice I hadn't eaten for a week. People think like, everyone's going to notice. They don't. And if someone says something like, do you want some of this? You can just say, I already ate, thanks. I'll just have coffee. I'll always just have coffee. I'll have coffee all the time. This is evening and I'm drinking coffee. I like coffee. Another fear, though, is many of us got overweight partly as protection from issues with inappropriate men. And there can be that fear, too, of, if I lose weight, if I'm attractive, are creepy guys going to bother me? And I can't say that it will never happen, although I have found men are more likely to flirt with me, but I haven't really been creeped on. Some of that might be because I'm just older, and no matter how skinny I get, I'm not getting any younger. But some of it, I think, honestly, is just because I'm really a much more powerful person than I have ever been. I struggled with obesity and diabetes for decades, and overcoming those things, it's sort of like I became the prince in my fairy tale. I rescued myself, and it just is such an incredible feeling of confidence to carry around with yourself. And I think I exude that, and therefore creepy guys are less likely to bother me because they can kind of tell I'm not a good victim. Um, and I think that helps a great deal. But also, honestly, I would just say if there are creepy guys in your life, or there have been, and you have trauma from that, like, don't let them win. It's not worth it that you have limitations, that you have illness because some guy was an asshole. I'm not going to get into that much more. We have had some rather intense conversations on this in the Engage group recently, but it's probably not as appropriate in a public live stream. And then there's just people who think this change sounds way too extreme. And I totally get that because, as I said, when Amanda told me, I'm like, eating once a day, that sounds like an eating disorder. But who was disordered? Me with my diabetes and obesity and disability, or her who was had become trim and was hiking all over the place with her boys. Um, we have different carb tolerances and we have different calorie tolerances, and we don't all have to be as extreme as each other. And I do find from my experience in the group where I've seen scores and scores of people reverse diabetes, the vast majority of them have not been nearly as extreme as I have. So don't think you have to, only eat 4 times a week. um, but if where you're at now is not working for you, you might need to be a bit more extreme. Honestly, I think a lot of us in the group already just have extreme personalities. I find fasting much easier than eating, and I find eating until I'm absolutely full, like a ridiculously big salad, like stuffed full, to be really easy. The in between stuff I don't like so much. I mean, it seems like, if I'm snacking, then I just want more, and then I want more, and I'm never content. And I think a lot of us in the group tend to be rather extreme personalities, um, at least in our relationship with food. Um, then this is the biggest one, the fear of failure. And I certainly had it. I talked to Amanda a day or two before I started my first fast, after I sheepishly admitted I was going to try this thing that I'd ignored her on the topic a year earlier. And I told her I'd looked at the research. I understood how it would work. Fasting would fix diabetes. I wasn't sure I could do it. I was sure it worked because I read all the science, and that's what convinces my biochemical brain. Um, but that's not the same thing as feeling like I can do it. And so many of us have just failed so many diets so many times, over and over and over again, for years, sometimes for decades, that we feel like we're going to fail this too. And I mean, the obvious thing to say is if you don't try, you can't fail, so you're failing anyway. But that really doesn't make you feel better. What I will say in terms of that particular fear is that last count I heard, we had 156 people who had lost 100 pounds or more. We call them century bears. 156. Most of these women are older and um, had failed at diets and been obese for decades. And somehow or another, this works. And I personally suspect, okay, it's a little bit of paranoia on my part, but I don't think the weight loss industry as a whole wants us to lose weight. We're their best customers. The longer you stay fat, the longer you go back and buy their products, the longer you'll be there giving them money. If we succeed, the industry as a whole loses. And in Eat Like a Bear, there's no magic potion or product or pre-bought food, crappy stuff that shows up in cardboard boxes. It's just real food. It actually saves money to do it. It's easy to do. And uh, Amanda doesn't win anything if you fail, because what she's counting is century bears. So the fact that we do it ourselves, I think, makes a big difference, because we're not looking for that magic answer. Um, but what I'd ask you to think about right now is, of all the various fears or issues that might be preventing you from starting, what are you most afraid of? What are you afraid of? You don't have to comment, but if you want to, I'm just over here looking briefly. Um, oh, wow, there's a whole bunch of comments. Okay. Okay, so hello, Jolene. Yeah, Georgia. Yeah, Steve said that about me the first time I did this live stream. Oh, Fred, you're relatively local. I'm in Mount Holly, over near Carlisle. Um, uh, yeah, Pat, never going back either. I know. Yes, Fred, I do have blue hair. Carry pepper spray at all times. I sell it. It's not like my issues that I've had in the past with men necessarily had to do with being attacked. But men can be creepy short of actually attacking you. I'm just currently in my current life much more likely to make a smart ass comment back at them. Um, men don't Men aren't being creepy because they're actually trying to get laid, because that doesn't work. They're doing it to feel powerful. So if you make them feel really small, that cuts that shit off. Um, um, yep, I know Fred. I know Dr. Barry. I reviewed on YouTube his book recently, and I know he's carnivore. His wife seems to be more on the ketovore side. Hi, Sandra. Good to see you. Um, Yes, I agree. I don't know how to say your name, your Nick, Giant. I agree. If people understand the reasons for doing something and why it will help, that can make things more sustainable. When Amanda told me she had lost weight, at the time I was really, really sick and I could barely breathe. I had to sleep sitting up because I had such bad congestive heart failure. So I didn't really care that she lost weight. When I was convinced by the research that I might be able to reverse diabetes, which I knew was the first health problem I had, that got me motivated. That made it much more sustainable, understanding it. Um, Sandy's going to be a century bear. Go get it, Sandy. Yes. Yeah, the fear of failure was big for me. Jude says she's succeeding but gaining it back. I think that's really, really why it's important as we're on this journey of sculpting our bodies that we really change our mindset around food as well. Okay, so going back to my little slideshow, I'm asking, what are you most afraid of? Which you don't have to comment, but just think about it in your head for a minute. Okay. Okay, what's the worst that can happen if that fear comes true? My biggest fear also was fear of failure. And what's the worst that can happen? I was also afraid of being hungry. But, if I just try it for 2 or 3 days and it doesn't work, I mean, so I can stop. um, really, what is the worst that can happen? If I try it and I can't do it, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I'm in the same position I was before I began. I mean, what's really the worst that can happen? Yeah, if some creepy guys hit on me, I'm going to have a sarcastic remark for them because besides stubbornness, I have a good deal of sarcasm in me as well. I mean, I can think of various worse things that can happen and then think about what would I do? Like, how horrible would it be? If some guy is creepy to me, he might make me feel bad for a few minutes. He might even give me a bit of PTSD to more traumatic things. But would this ruin your life? I mean, if you decide you're going to try the 3-day challenge and it doesn't work for you, the odds are really, really good that you're not going to end up divorced and friendless and homeless. I mean, it's not going to ruin things. You can try it, see if it fits. Maybe it doesn't. I'm certainly not saying that everyone in the whole world should eat like a bear. And as Fred was pointing out on YouTube, many people are successful doing the carnivore thing. My best friend was. When he first got his diabetes diagnosis and asked for my advice, I already knew Pete was not going to eat the way I do. He was not going to eat a giant salad every day. I've known this man for more than 30 years. And I've nagged him to eat vegetables the whole time, and it hasn't worked. And I absolutely, directed him to carnivore. And worst comes to worst, if you try it and it doesn't fit for you, you can find another version of keto, or you can give up. But are you really going to be worse off than if you haven't tried? Now, if you really don't want to, I'm not your mother. I can't make you. I am not showing up at your house to force feed you a salad. I'm not even going to guilt you about starving children on the other side of the planet. Do what you want to do. I certainly don't think anyone has to do what I do. I do have a friend who is type 2 diabetic, and she also has other reasons to be discriminated against. And so she rails at society a great deal, justifiably, but she kind of rails about having diabetes too. And that's really not something anyone else is putting on her. But the notion of change, she actually had her leg amputated. I was trying to give her some advice about controlling her blood glucose and wound healing, but she had a wound that wouldn't heal for a long time, and she had her leg amputated. And afterwards, she posted something about having an endo who was trying to change how she ate. And she was very offended about this, that some doctor who specializes in diabetes would be trying to change her life. And honestly, actually, I quit following her at that point. It's like, you don't want to listen to anyone. You lost a leg. How bad does it have to get? I mean, some people aren't going to want to change no matter how bad things get. Like in the addiction world, like AA, they talk about hitting bottom. And I don't know if she's ever going to hit bottom. And if it's not that bad, if you're just a few pounds overweight or just barely diabetic, maybe it's not that bad. I'm still glad you're listening to this, because if it gets worse, you'll know how to fix it. You'll know where I am. There's also the feeling that it's just really, really unfair, which it is, as it was for my friend, that like the only way to fix this is to change the way you eat. I once did what I would call an oral glucose tolerance test on my ex. I had made a 2-layer chocolate cake, and he ate a sixth of it in a sitting, and I was going to show him how bad his blood glucose got. So I tested him several times, like at 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour, out past 2 hours. His blood glucose never got out of the 70s. Okay. That is somebody with an actually normal metabolic response. And it isn't fair. He actually grew up in a house where his mom worked in a bakery and brought home, like, they made decorated shaped cakes, so there was always extra bits they cut off. She brought him cake every day. I grew up with a strict mother who hardly ever let us eat sugar. How come I ended up diabetic? It isn't fair. But I got a crappy hand of cards as far as that goes. My mom, who was trim and never diabetic and could binge on food like I can't even imagine like doing, always was trim and healthy. My father, however, was all of his life obese, and he became diabetic in, I think, his 40s and continued. And unfortunately, I got his genes and not hers, and this is it. I can be angry about that all day. Being angry about it doesn't help, as it didn't help my friend. But given that these are the cards I have very low carb tolerance, even compared to most diabetics. All I can do is, these are my cards. I got to play them the best I can to get the most for me. Because it's not benefiting anyone else that I'm not diabetic. It's not benefiting someone else that I can walk. This is for me. But I don't even remember what this video was supposed to be. How bad is that? I apparently had a video in the slideshow, and it's not here. But I can tell from my little comment up there in the corner about a trial run that I'm going to suggest the 3-day challenge. As I was saying earlier, it's like the idea of going on a first date versus getting married. Getting married is a big, big, big decision. And you do not have to decide you are going to eat low carb and fast for the rest of your life. You do not have to decide that. What you have to do is maybe try it on. Try it on and see, does it fit? It might fit for you. And if it does, I suspect you'll be as pleased with your results as I am, which is really hard to overemphasize, honestly, very hard. So let's move on to a slide that possibly has some relevance to what I'm talking about, as opposed to one without a video. I am going to want to know what other topics you might want me to discuss. I'm going to be doing live streams for another couple weeks. And I've done live streams on some of these before, but what matters to me most is what do you guys need from me? Because I'm not sitting here talking to a computer for me. I'm doing it for you. So I really need to know what you might want me to discuss in the future. And now we're at the end of my planned discussion. So I will go look at comments and answer whatever questions I run across. Jude, I think in terms of like if you succeed, but then you gain it back, which I know so many of us have been through on so many previous diets, that a lot of it has to do with engaging. I went on a brief hike today. It wasn't like strenuous or anything because it was cold out. But that is something I couldn't do before and that I can do now. And just being out there and like being able to see, it is pretty out even though it's winter. There's no snow on the ground here. It's just, all the trees are just all kind of brown and the grass is all brown. But still, walking past this lake, there's like this bit near us was like had a frozen surface and the deeper bits were still moving. It's pretty. It's like I'm engaging in what I couldn't do before. And that on top of having built habits for a couple of years working at this makes me pretty sure I'm not ever going back. It's not worth it. I get that, Georgia. I'm going to actually read this because there's people on YouTube too. Georgia says, I think for me, with my stumble last year and how easy it was, it scrolled, how easy it was to fall back into old ways terrified me. It has shown me a side that I don't want to see again. And I would say I had a bit of that happening. I got really sick after my booster, like week enough that I couldn't get up and make coffee. And there was entirely too much DoorDash involved. And I did stay keto. I was eating keto, but I was eating whatever I wanted. And you know what? Any place you're going to order a salad from isn't going to be big enough. So, I'm doubling up on protein and I'm ordering more than once a day. And this was getting very expensive too, but in like a week, I put on 5 pounds. And I told my friend Denise, I'm like, I'm making videos. I can't get fatter on camera. I can't do that. And I caught myself quick enough. And honestly, within a couple weeks of going back to my normal diet and being more calorie conscious again. In fact, I actually started logging calories. Amanda, she used to say, you don't really have to track anything, just eat your salads. And then later she kind of said that she has to think about, but she was just used to thinking about calories. So maybe some of us do need to. I was not used to thinking about calories. I was used to thinking about carbs because that's what I aimed at because of the diabetes, like the carbs. I have to think about the carbs. And so I started tracking calories recently. And And it really helps that instead of ordering a whole bunch of bunless burgers over a week, that you're actually eating the vegetables so that you get full enough that you can't eat 3 burgers. Um, how long should it take to lose the last 40 pounds? Diana asks. That is a really, really good question. And I'll say, don't do it the way I did it. Okay. I lost 65 pounds in a year. And then I lost 5 pounds in a year. Okay. Um, I was cheating just here and there, and I had some issues where I discovered how much I love to binge peanut butter, and I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to try it again. Maybe this time I can just eat a tablespoon at a time. It took me a while. I think my desperation level wasn't bad enough. So, so I would say if you decide to go into maintenance prematurely, it could take a really long time. But the real answer to that is that it is going to be slower. Because, I mean, if you're 400 pounds and you lose 10 pounds, well, I mean, just carrying that weight around takes a lot more calories. But the difference between what you take in and what you burn as you get smaller and smaller is a smaller amount. So the last 40 pounds is going to be harder than, say, the first 100. And the last 10 is probably going to be the worst. I want to lose about 25 pounds this year. And we just did a community-wide 3-day challenge. And I'm down 4 or 5 pounds from that. But I'm kind of figuring I'm going to need to be pretty strict for anywhere from 3 to 6 months. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I've always been, relative to other folks, a slow loser in the group, which Amanda says we're not allowed to call ourselves. So I think it may take me a while to get the last 25 pounds off. I also think I'm much more metabolically ill than most people are, which by itself does. So it's a really hard thing to predict. Like you can say, I lost, 10 pounds this month. So if I have 40 pounds to lose, I expect it to be gone in 4 months, but the rate of loss slows down. So it's hard to say. And it really does depend on your metabolism. I don't want to present exercise as a way to lose weight because all the research I've seen says it isn't. You just don't burn that many calories like exercising. My hike today, I doubt I burned a couple hundred calories. It really has more to do with what you eat than what you move. But one of the things that exercise does for you is raise your metabolism. So even when you are sitting on your butt doing a live stream, you're burning more calories than you would have been otherwise. Sandy says she usually gets 800 to 1,000 a day. Well, I wouldn't have been able to tell you how much I ate a bit earlier. I can tell you that my natural inclination seems to be, which is why I was stalled for a year, around 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day, which I suspect will work for me in maintenance, but has not been working for me to continue my weight loss. And I'm now aiming at more like, well, Amanda says 1,000 to 1,200. That's what the RBS is. And I do not wish to contradict Amanda. But my personal goal at the moment is to stay under 1,400, including everything, not the RBS, but the MCT oil powder I put in my coffee, like everything. For a short period, I'm just tracking to get used to thinking about calories because I really never have before. Like I said, I always thought about carbs. That's an amusing way of thinking about it. Yeah, for me, the last 25 pounds, I'm down to the hard. I'm down to the weight that's been there since I was in high school, and even before. So yeah, the end is tougher than the beginning. It is, I mean, the bigger you are, the more encouraging it is at the beginning because you lose so much faster. And sometimes when people say, why don't I lose as fast as somebody else? And it's like they were 400 pounds when they started and you're 200. If you want to lose as fast as them, You have to be 400 pounds. Like, come on. That's not a good way to lose faster. Get up higher in the first place. Our journeys are very individual because, like I talked earlier about genetics, and I got these really crappy genes from my dad, and I activated them very early. I did decades of metabolic damage, damage to my organs and eyesight and heart, decades of it, with the diabetes. So, like I said, I'm a pretty extreme case, but most people are going to do better than me, which is really good news for you guys. But you're still not necessarily going to do as well as everyone else. Our journeys are all very individual because we have differing genes to start with, different damage that we've done to our body, and different metabolisms. And I can say I haven't seen anyone it hasn't worked for. I've seen people quit, like decide it isn't for them, this isn't what they want to do. But I have not seen anybody do this and not be successful. So if you have, you got to send me an email or something because I don't know you exist. And while we know that, what was it, 156, she said the other day, people have 156 century bears, that's people who've lost 100 pounds or more. And I've started collecting testimonies from people who've lost diabetes. There's a bunch of those on my website, but it's a private group and everyone doesn't want to go public. I have seen scores and scores of people reverse their diabetes. I mean, it's got to be over 100. And we're not even looking at people who like only had 30 or 40 pounds to lose in the first place and got there, or were maybe just pre-diabetic or just barely diabetic. I mean, like my friend Pete doesn't count as, he doesn't post in the group. I happen to know he reversed his diabetes, literally got the diagnosis, and then 3 months later didn't have it. I know of so many success stories, it blows my mind. I don't know of anyone this hasn't worked for. Now we all adapt it to ourselves. We're not all doing the exact same thing. Amanda says she eats late morning. Yeah, not me. I haven't eaten yet. It's almost 8 o'clock. I'm going to go eat as soon as I'm done talking to you people. Um, um, we all adapt it to our own lives and our likes and dislikes. It's not like everybody has to do this the same way. But I haven't seen anyone who's actually tried it and stuck with it who hasn't been massively successful. I mean, just, well, that's a good pun, massively successful. What's the opposite of massively? Because what we're successful at is losing a heck of a lot of mass. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to wind up now so I can go have my dinner. I should have had that before this, but I didn't. And if anyone's wondering, I'll just end with, I made some what I call unstuffed pepper casserole. It's basically like stuffed peppers, well, minus rice, obviously, sort of Spanish flavored. And I'm going to have that, and I'm going to have a small salad on the side because there's already a lot of vegetables in the stuffed peppers, but probably not enough to really satisfy me. So I'm going to have a small salad, and I have on hand ranch dressing left over from the 3-day challenge. And I also have some creamy Italian. Not sure which I'll use yet. And that's what I'm going to go do. So thank y'all for joining me. And if you have suggestions on my page here of what else you'd like to see me discuss, definitely hit me up because, like I said, I'm here doing this for you guys. It's really good to see you all, and I'll see you next week. I plan to be here at the same time, although I don't know yet what I'm talking about. And I'll see you all then. Good night.